Did you know that one African president spent 1,645 days living in a single Swiss hotel, spending $40,000 a day, while his country fell apart at home? But he's just one of the 8 richest black dynasties in Switzerland, and each one of them has stories so wild they might make you scream. Let's count them out, one family at a time. Number 8. The Annan Dynasty, the quiet weight of a famous last name. Every list needs an entry that establishes the baseline. Basically, the old guard dynasty that tells you what established black presence in Switzerland actually looks like before the wilder chapters start arriving. For this list, that entry is the Annan family. And quiet here does not mean uninteresting. Kofi Annan spent years in Geneva as UN Secretary General, one of the most globally recognized diplomatic figures of the late 20th century. The family's Swiss connection runs deep through his son, Kojo Annan, who built his professional career in the city, including a consulting role at Côte Inspection SA, a Geneva-based trade inspection firm operating across West Africa. That role later attracted scrutiny during the UN Oil for Food investigation, which examined whether the Côte contract had been improperly obtained through family connections. Kojo has consistently maintained his innocence regarding any wrongdoing, and no criminal charges were filed against him. But the episode illustrated something important about how Switzerland operates at the intersection of global governance and private commerce. The lines between diplomatic legitimacy and commercial interest are thin, and the city is very good at hosting both simultaneously. His current focus is Africa 10, a social enterprise that identifies and supports outstanding young African leaders through innovation and sustainability challenges. The organization partners with the World Economic Forum and other Geneva institutions, using Switzerland's position as the global governance hub to amplify African voices in rooms where those voices have historically been underrepresented. The Annan name carries weight in those rooms that no amount of consulting fees could purchase independently. Kojo's estimated net worth sits between $5 million and $10 million, the most modest figure on this list by a significant margin. But the Annan dynasty is not primarily a wealth story. It is an influence story, and in Geneva, those two things are not the same currency. Now, the next man in our list had an $80 million super yacht chartered by global celebrities, a Manhattan penthouse worth $50 million, Swiss racing circuit appearances, and then one day he just disappeared. We still don't entirely know where he is. Number 7. The Aluko Dynasty, the rumored Naomi Campbell, romance, Swiss racing, and then nothing. Kola Aluko's story moves at a specific speed that is very difficult to maintain, which is probably why it ended the way it did. At his peak, he was one of the most visible symbols of Nigerian oil wealth operating in Europe. An $80 million super yacht called the Galactica Star, later chartered by global celebrities, a $50.9 million penthouse at 157 in Manhattan, a Swiss citizenship, a property in the Ticino Canton, a regular presence on the Swiss racing circuit with Kessel Racing, and rumors of a relationship with Naomi Campbell that the Nigerian press found absolutely irresistible in 2013. His wealth was built through Atlantic Energy, which secured no-bid oil contracts worth an estimated $7 billion during the tenure of former Nigerian Petroleum Minister Diezani Alison Madueke. The Swiss financial infrastructure was central to how it all moved. $40 million at Deutsche Bank Geneva, $25 million at LDT Switzerland, and a Swiss citizenship that provided strategic flexibility across European jurisdictions that a Nigerian passport alone would not have offered. Then the investigation started. The FBI, the UK National Crime Agency, the Swiss Attorney General. The assets began to go. The super yacht was auctioned for $42 million, a $38 million loss on the purchase price. The Manhattan penthouse was foreclosed. The Swiss accounts were frozen, and by 2018, Aluko himself had largely vanished from public view, with reports placing him variously in Mexico, in Europe, and generally somewhere quiet. Here is the detail that makes this story genuinely strange, rather than simply cautionary. In 2025, Aluko resurfaced online promoting a premium tequila brand called Los Siete Angeles. No press conference, no statement about the legal proceedings, just tequila content from an undisclosed location as if the preceding 7 years had been a brief sabbatical rather than a multi-jurisdiction asset seizure. Whether that constitutes a comeback, a rebrand, or something else entirely is a question that Swiss prosecutors are presumably still working through. The government documents also revealed that among his expenditures in support of the former minister was the provision of hams, sausages, and orchids, a detail that belongs in a novel but is, unfortunately for Aluko, in a court filing. Next up, let's look at a man who spent $40,000 per day in a Geneva hotel, and his daughter has a suite booked there year-round. Number 6. The Biya Dynasty, 1,645 days in a Geneva hotel. Paul Biya has been the president of Cameroon since 1982. He is also, for a meaningful portion of that tenure, the unofficial resident of the Hotel InterContinental in Geneva, a 5-star property on the shores of Lake Geneva that has functioned in practical terms as his offshore presidential palace. Research by the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project estimates that Biya and his entourage have spent approximately 1,645 days in Switzerland across his presidency, at a daily cost estimated between $40,000 and $47,000 for his floor alone. Do the math on that. $40,000 a day for days that now number in the thousands, for a president whose country ranks among the poorest in Africa. The total expenditure across these Swiss stays is estimated to exceed $177 million. Paid, according to reports primarily in cash, to prevent the trips from appearing in official state accounts. The entourage typically numbers around 60 people: cabinet members, security personnel, family. The 16th floor of the InterContinental is, for the duration of these visits, effectively a satellite government. His daughter, Brenda Biya, has taken the Swiss connection into its next generation. She attended the prestigious Collège du Léman near Geneva. She maintains a permanent suite at the InterContinental, reportedly booked in her name year-round regardless of occupancy. Her lifestyle is extensively documented on social media, featuring Rolex watches and designer fashion, and is a consistent source of controversy given her father's governance record. In 2024, she was convicted in Geneva for defamation, a proceeding that further publicized her permanent Swiss residency and her claim to having connections in Switzerland that provide a degree of protection unavailable elsewhere. The Swiss government has consistently defended Biya's right to reside in Geneva, citing his status as a legitimate head of state and Switzerland's role as a host country for international organizations. The family treats this diplomatic cover as an operational feature of their lifestyle, not an incidental courtesy. Meanwhile, Cameroonian activists have made the InterContinental a focal point for protests that the hotel's security apparatus handles with practiced efficiency. A president governing by proxy from a hotel floor. Now the next entry froze $900 million across 7 Swiss bank accounts, and the man behind it married the daughter of Angola's founding revolutionary president. Number 5. The São Vicente-Neto Dynasty, a family name borrowed from 2 revolutions. Carlos Manuel de São Vicente ran AAA Seguros, the Angolan state insurance monopoly that held a government-decreed monopoly to insure Angola's entire oil sector. Between 2012 and 2019, Swiss prosecutors allege he transferred approximately $900 million from that institution into his personal accounts. In December 2018, Swiss authorities froze nearly $900 million across 7 bank accounts, a case that became one of the largest asset freezes in Swiss banking history. The specific trigger for the investigation was a $213 million transfer into Vicente's personal account that Bank Suisse, a Swiss private bank, flagged as unusual and reported to authorities. The subsequent probe revealed accounts not just in his name, but in the names of his wife and their son Ivo, structured across Swiss accounts and Singapore banking institutions in a manner that prosecutors described as systematic rather than incidental. His wife, Irene Alexandra da Silva Neto, is the daughter of Antonio Agostinho Neto, Angola's first president, national hero, and poet revolutionary whose face appears on the country's currency. That lineage provided the Neto family with a degree of political insulation that commercial assets alone cannot purchase, and the marriage between Vicente and Irene bridged commercial power with foundational revolutionary legitimacy in exactly the way that Angolan elite networks require. In 2022, a court in Angola convicted Vicente on charges of embezzlement and money laundering, sentencing him to 9 years in prison and ordering $4.5 billion in compensation. The family's legal teams in Singapore and Switzerland have fought subsequent proceedings to access frozen funds, arguing they need resources for access to justice, a phrase that, in the context of $1.1 billion identified in bank size alone, requires some rhetorical charity to accept at face value. One telling detail: prosecutors noted that when they requested information from the banks, the contracts Vicente submitted to justify the transfers had creation dates that postdated the bank requests. The documents explaining why the money was there were written after being asked why the money was there. But if you think that's crazy, wait till you hear about the next woman who built 400 companies across 41 countries, has an Interpol Red Notice, and is still posting luxury content online. Number 4. The Dos Santos Dynasty, the most defiant Instagram feed in African business history. Isabel dos Santos was once Africa's richest woman, with a net worth that reached approximately $2.2 billion at its peak. Her connection to Switzerland was anchored in Geneva through de Grisogono, a Swiss luxury jeweler that she and her late husband, Syndica de Colo, acquired a controlling stake in during 2012, using a financial structure that prosecutors later alleged funneled Angolan State Diamond Company funds into a private luxury acquisition. Under their ownership, de Grisogono hosted some of the most extravagant events on the global luxury circuit: Cannes Film Festival parties, boutiques in exclusive Swiss cantons, the kind of presence that converts commercial ownership into social currency in rooms where both matter equally. The brand collapsed into bankruptcy in 2020, following the Luanda leaks, a massive investigative project revealing how $700 million in Angolan state funds allegedly moved through her network of over 400 companies spanning 41 countries and managed partly through Swiss advisory infrastructure. In December 2023, a London court ordered a freeze on up to $733 million of her assets. An Interpol Red Notice is active. Angolan authorities want her returned. She remains in disputed legal territory across multiple European jurisdictions. And yet, here is the detail that makes Dos Santos genuinely singular in this entire lineup. She continues to post on social media, luxury travel, business commentary, personal reflections. The feed of someone who is either completely untroubled by an international arrest warrant or performing that equanimity as a strategic posture. Possibly both. Her mother, Tatiana Kukanova, and her children have been linked through shell companies to luxury properties in Dubai and London. The family's wealth originated in the 38-year presidency of her father, José Eduardo dos Santos, which provided access to oil, diamonds, and telecommunications monopolies that created the initial capital base. Isabel has consistently maintained that her wealth was legitimately earned through business acumen rather than political access. Swiss prosecutors, Portuguese courts, and the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists have collectively formed a different view. And now, the next name in our list is running a $2.7 billion mining empire, has a sister who is South Africa's First Lady, and is shaping African football governance from Switzerland's diplomatic corridors. Number 3. The Motsepe Dynasty, the most institutionally complete black dynasty in Europe. Patrice Motsepe built African rainbow minerals into one of the most significant mining operations on the continent. Gold, platinum, coal, and base metals extracted from South African soil and converted into a personal fortune estimated at $2.7 billion, with peaks reaching $3.3 billion in stronger commodity cycles. He was South Africa's first black billionaire. His Swiss connection is less about residency and more about the corridors of international governance and luxury commerce that Geneva and Zurich provide access to when your name carries the weight his does. His wife, Dr. Precious Moloi Motsepe, is one of the most prominent women in African fashion and philanthropy, a physician-turned-cultural entrepreneur whose leadership at African Fashion International places her in direct dialogue with the Swiss luxury goods ecosystem that shapes global premium brand economics. His sister, Dr. Tsepo Motsepe, is the First Lady of South Africa. His other sister, Bridget Radebe, was a pioneering force in South African mining during its post-apartheid restructuring. His son, Tilhope, serves as chairman of Mamelodi Sundowns, South Africa's most successful football club. Think about the reach of that family map for a second. Mining capital, presidential proximity, fashion influence, sports governance, and philanthropic infrastructure, all operating simultaneously across the same bloodline. That is not diversification. That is dominance across every layer of institutional influence simultaneously. Motsepe's role as president of the Confederation of African Football places him in Geneva and Zurich regularly, using Swiss institutions as neutral ground for international sports governance negotiations that involve billions in television rights and continental infrastructure investment. The family's approach is consistently described as quiet, lasting authority, a phrase that appears in multiple profiles and that functions as an accurate description. They do not need to be loud, because the architecture of their influence speaks well above conversational volume. His giving pledge commitment, donating at least half his wealth to charitable causes, ensures that the Motsepe name is attached to meaningful social outcomes in a way that compounds the family's institutional standing across both the African continent and the European financial centers where their capital moves. Next up, we head to a name that needs almost no introduction. But the Swiss chapter of his story is the one most people don't know, and it's more strategically interesting than anything on the racing circuit. Number 2, the Hamilton Empire, the most sophisticated athlete, wealth architecture in sports. Lewis Hamilton didn't move to Switzerland for the mountains, though the mountains are obviously excellent. He moved because Switzerland offers ultra-high net worth individuals a specialized tax arrangement, lump sum taxation based on living expenses rather than global income, that allows earners at his level to retain a structurally different proportion of their income than they would in the United Kingdom or the United States. For someone earning $50 million annually in racing salary and endorsements, that difference across a decade is not a marginal tax efficiency. It is a wealth tier shift. His net worth sits between $300 million and $450 million, built on 7 Formula One World Championships, a decade of Swiss residency that allowed strategic wealth consolidation, and a commercial operation that extends far beyond the cockpit. His 2025 move to Ferrari, ending his legendary partnership with Mercedes, came with a reported base salary of $60 million annually, potentially rising above $100 million with performance bonuses, making him the highest-paid driver in the history of the sport. His endorsement portfolio includes Tommy Hilfiger, Puma, and IWC Schaffhausen, the last of which has its operational center in Switzerland, making the relationship geographically coherent as well as commercially significant. His sports ownership stake in the Denver Broncos situates him inside the NFL's ownership infrastructure, where franchise values have been compounding faster than most financial instruments available to individual investors. His Almave non-alcoholic spirits brand reflects the growing, mindful luxury market segment. His Plus 44 streetwear line and various fashion collaborations point toward a lifestyle conglomerate model that uses the Hamilton name as an access mechanism across categories that racing alone would never reach. Mission 44, his philanthropic foundation focused on creating opportunities for young people from underrepresented backgrounds, uses Switzerland's reputation as a neutral governance hub for strategic deployment in a way that mirrors how Motsepe and Thiam have used the same geography. The Alpine serenity was real, the tax mathematics were realer, and the wealth architecture built across that decade of Swiss residency is what the Ferrari contract is now being layered on top of. And now, we arrive at the number 1 spot, where sits a man who didn't just live in Switzerland. He ran one of its most prestigious financial institutions, descended from Ivorian royalty, and lost the job because his neighbor spied on him. Genuinely. Number 1. The Thiam Dynasty, first African to run a major Swiss bank, now running for president. Tidjane Thiam's family tree requires a moment to actually absorb. On his mother's side, he is a descendant of Queen Yamoussoukro and the nephew of Félix Houphouët-Boigny, the founding president of Côte d'Ivoire and one of the most consequential political figures in 20th century West African history. His father, Amadou Thiam, was a prominent journalist and cabinet minister who supported the independence movement. Tidjane himself was the first Ivorian to pass the entrance exam for École Polytechnique, France's most elite engineering institution. which remains in the specific social topography of Francophone West African elite families, a meaningful distinction. He then built one of the most accomplished executive careers of any African professional in the history of global finance. CEO of the British insurer Prudential. Then, in 2015, CEO of Credit Suisse, becoming the first African to lead a major Swiss financial institution in the bank's 169-year history. His annual compensation at Credit Suisse regularly exceeded $10 million. During his tenure, wealth management assets expanded by over 121 billion Swiss francs. His net worth is estimated between $200 million and $500 million, built on executive compensation, private equity operations, and his founding of Freedom Acquisition Corp., which executed a $345 million merger with solar technology firm Complete Solaria. And then the spy scandal. His neighbor at Credit Suisse, a senior executive named Iqbal Khan, left the bank for a rival firm. What followed was the revelation that Credit Suisse had hired a private surveillance firm to follow Khan, apparently to monitor whether he was soliciting clients or colleagues. When the surveillance was exposed, the fallout was spectacular. The head of security resigned, the bank faced reputational damage, and the chain of accountability eventually led to Thiam's departure in February 2020. He has consistently maintained that he did not order or know about the surveillance. Swiss prosecutors did not charge him. The person who apparently did know about it, and who resigned, was someone else. But the story stuck to the bank, and to him, and the resignation was the price of the narrative's resolution. He left Credit Suisse carrying the distinction of being its most historic CEO and the circumstances of one of Switzerland's more extraordinary corporate scandals. His most recent chapter is the most surprising. In 2025, he was appointed to lead the Ivorian opposition, positioning himself as a candidate for the country's presidency. The arc from West African royalty to Swiss banking history to a potential head of state is not one that any conventional wealth biography contains room for, which is probably the point. He is an IOC member. He sits on the board of Kering, the French luxury conglomerate that owns Gucci and Saint Laurent. He contributes to the Africa Progress Panel. The Herrleberg Villa on Lake Zurich was not just a tax address. It was a stage from which global influence was projected at a level that most of the other names on this list, for all their money and complexity, haven't come close to matching. And that's a wrap on 8 richest black dynasties in Switzerland, with 8 completely different relationships to one of the world's most discreet and powerful countries. Which one impressed you the most? Let us know in the comments, and for more such interesting peeks into how black wealth is prospering across the globe, take a look at Black Status.